Hello and welcome to episode 121 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And this was a very down-to-the-wire week for a couple games. Two top seeds narrowly hanging on Sunday. One expected top seed dropping below 500. A lot to talk about this week. We've got an interview for the first time this regular season as well.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. And I'm also excited because this is the first time in 3 weeks that you and I are both on the same podcast.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago I couldn't make it. Last week you couldn't make it. So yeah, we are finally back together. Gonna be good. Always nice to record with you.
Yes, always a pleasure to record with you as well, good sir. But before we dive into the matchups here, there is one of the few things that I love equal to Cam, and that is trades. This one,
Nice.
another Ruthvik trade. Ruthvik's making a lot of trades recently. Ruthvik traded Luis Garcia, James Outman, and Max Kepler to Daniel and Matt for George Springer and Hunter Renfroe. Cam, why don't you start with your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't know if I said this in the intro, but Ruthvik is the interview we have this week. Always great to have him on to talk about these two trades that he's made recently. But yeah, this is a very interesting one. I think Outman's an interesting sell high. I definitely get the appeal of trading away Outman when his value may never be higher than this. And on the other hand, I definitely get the appeal for the Drury to acquire a young guy like this. I think Ruthvik got two solid bats back. I do like Kepler. Ruthvik, maybe, yeah, maybe a bit of a sell low on that end. I do like the StatCast data for him. I think he's bound to turn around a little bit. But yeah, Springer and Renfroe are an upgrade over Outman and Kepler. And then Garcia, he's a good young pitcher for the Drury to get, but yeah, he did just get injured, so he's going to be a while. Not that that matters for the Drury on the timeline they're on. So overall, I'd say it's a solid win-win. I don't really have too much to say. A lot of big names. Hunter Renfroe has been traded now. Let's see how many times. That is 7 times he's been traded, including twice this calendar year. He had not been traded until, let me see if I'm getting this right, July 19th of last year. He was then traded 3 times in 8 days, then again at the deadline, then 3 more times since then. So 7 times in about 11 months that Hunter Renfroe has been traded.
That's insane. Yeah, I feel like Hunter Renfroe is a name that I've seen a lot on the move recently, but I love it. He is a very solid outfielder. But I'll give my thoughts on the deal quickly. I feel like this is a type of trade I've been trying to tell Ruthvik to make forever, where he trades a little bit of his pitching surplus to go get some real hitting. And it's unfortunate that it comes on the backs of him making what might be what I consider his most short-sighted trade that he has ever made. Ruthvik is very lucky that I was not on the podcast last week when you all discussed the trade, and I'm not going to get too deep into that trade here, but Ruthvik needed to improve the offense. I think he got 2 above average bats. Yes, Springer started off the season a little slow, but I expect him to pick it up and be the force that he has been. I get that they are a little older, but Ruthvik's team has been playing pretty well so far, and I think that he views this as a way to stay competitive for one of those last playoff spots, and I absolutely agree with him there. From the Bellies perspective, I don't think Springer and Renfroe do them much good. I know they acquired them as part of this push to maybe be a little more relevant this year. That clearly hasn't worked. They're about to drop, or at the time of recording, they have dropped to 1-8. So trading veteran pieces and getting two interesting young pieces in return, and Garcia and Outman, I think, is interesting and good for them. Outman's a weird case. I don't know why the StatCast page looks so garbage, because it really wasn't early in the season, but I still think he's a decent get for them. As you mentioned, Garcia with the TJ, he's probably going to be out for a while. So he's still an interesting ad, and good for Ruthvik for being able to get value for him. And you know my thoughts about Max Kepler. I don't really care about him. So I think you're right. Pretty decent win-win for both sides.
Yeah, no, certainly. And yeah, I like Kepler more than you do, but that's okay. Yeah, that was the only trade we had this week. Do you want to dive into the matchups?
Yeah, let's dive into the matchups. Few matchups went down to the last day. I mean, do we want to stick on the trend of Ruthvik here? Because I think that one might have been our most interesting matchup of the week, at least to me.
I agree. Yeah, this was a very near upset that we would have liked to see. Ruthvik led most of the week. In the end, he just fell a couple of strikeouts shy of beating Jake. A couple RBI, couple points of ERA, or OBP rather. Disappointing for those of us who wanted to see the upset, certainly, and as Jake moves to 7-2.
Yeah, disappointing indeed. This basically mirrored the last time they played, which was if I can pull it up here. They last played to start the month of May. Ruthvik lost 5-6-1 after holding the lead most of the league. Jake making a big comeback on that Sunday. That's basically what happened here again. They were tied for a chunk of Sunday. Jake kind of took the lead, and from there, he never relinquished it. A couple close calls, as you mentioned, but nothing really. Nothing really just kind of worked out for Ruthvik there in order for him to pull out the W. Not the best offensive week for either of them. Very low OBPs. 301 for Jake, 295 for Ruthvik. But shout out to Ruthvik for shattering his stolen base record. It was previously 9. He had 13 steals this week. Both teams finished with similar numbers in runs, doubles, homers, and ribbies. That was all pretty close. On the pitching side, one more strikeout by Jake than Ruthvik. Both put up some decent quality start numbers. 6 for Ruthvik, 5 for Jake. 7 saves for Jake is really a really strong week there. Only 4 for Ruthvik. Ruthvik narrowly edged him in holds, and they split ERA and WHIP with Ruthvik narrowly winning WHIP. But couple of categories that looked very strong for each team, but overall, not their best performance.
Yeah, not their best performance. And looking around the league, I wouldn't really say that too many teams played well. And maybe that's making me reevaluate how I feel about the performance of my team, considering, I might have been instead of a bottom 2 team this week, maybe a top of the bottom half. I don't know. Either way, yeah, maybe just not a lot of great baseball played this week. Jake had ERA. He got 7 saves, which is nice. You mentioned Ruthvik steals. He also pitched all right, although not quite well enough in the end. While we're talking about Ruthvik, he got a good hitting week from Devers, a solid week from Keibert Ruiz. He got a good pitching performance from Johan Duran out of the bullpen. Joe Musgrove made a good start. Aaron Savali made a solid start, but he only went 5 innings. Looking at Jake's team, though, matchup MVP has got to be Corey Seager. He drove in 10 runs this week with a 429 on base. Scored 7, hit 3 doubles to go with 2 homers. Shout out to JD Martinez, who I'll admit I thought he was washed going into the season. I was wrong about that. He has been really solid for that Dodgers team. He's slugging 612. Did you know that?
And I didn't know he was doing that good. I knew he was hitting pretty solid. I didn't know he was doing that solid.
Yeah, no, he has been great. I was wrong about him. Um, but yeah, no, good week for Matt Olson too. Pitching wise, a good week for Evaldi, who has been a Cy Young candidate. But Corey Seager has been the best, and that Texas team, my God.
Speaking of that Texas team, there's a stat on my TV that the best ERA in a 7-start span in Rangers history, 2023, Nathan Evaldi with a .68 ERA for Jake's team. You want to know who has an even lower ERA
Who's
in
that?
that same span for the
John
Rangers?
Gray?
No, not John Gray of all time. Sorry, of all time.
Oh, of all time, Nolan Ryan.
I
Oh,
believe
is this going to be Giovanni Gallardo?
it is Giovanni Gallardo. So there's another pitcher, I believe it was Nolan Ryan, who has a better one, but number 2 on that list is Giovanni Gallardo with a
Man.
.60 ERA. That 1 year he spent with Texas before the Orioles signed him to that big contract.
So his first Texas stint, not his second Texas stint.
Yes. Second Texas stint wasn't quite as good as the first Texas stint.
It was not. But yeah, Jake pulls out a win, moves to 7-2. Ruthvik drops to 3-5-1, meaning he is still he remains half a game behind Erik, despite Erik losing this week. I think we can transition into that matchup. He is now 4-5, below 500 after 9 weeks, presumably for the first time ever.
Well, so technically he was under 500 to start the season because he lost to Yuki to open the season. And then he was 1-2 after losing to Jake in week 3. So before this season, I believe he hasn't really been under that 500 mark, other than maybe a couple week 1 losses, which I'd have to go back and double check for sure. But I certainly don't remember him losing week 1 a ton. But Erik's been kind of straddling that 500 line all year. This is now his 3rd straight loss. Losses to Ruthvik and Jake the last 2 weeks, maybe a little more defendable. That loss to Jake looks worse than it was. He did have a chance going into the last game of Sunday to win, but this has to be a tough pill for Erik to swallow. His starting pitching did well this week, 5 quality starts, 86 strikeouts, 3 ERA, 110 whip. His bullpen production, not really there. EBO won both of those categories. And then on the hitting side, EBO won 5 of the 6 offensive categories. 51 ribbies, made for a very solid week there. 355 OBP, 7 steals, 24 doubles, which I don't think is a record for them, but you never know. It's one of the better doubles numbers for sure. Just 1 short of their doubles record. And that offensive prowess ended up making the difference this week. EVO advances to 3-6, and Erik is only a game above him at 4-5. Who would have seen this coming at the beginning of the season, maybe beginning of this week?
Yeah, seriously. Erik at 4-5, out of a playoff spot still as we speak. Yeah, like you said, he pitched well. He got a great performance from Max Scherzer, who's been really hot lately. He's had that is 4 really, really good starts in a row now for him. In addition to that, he got a good start from James Paxton against the Reds, so I'm not sure how much that counts. Hunter Green was solid though this week, but you know how up and down he can be. But yeah, hitting wise, he just wasn't cutting it with the bad week from Jose Ramirez and and Lane Thomas not doing well. Royce Lewis is up. Ruthvik or uh, Erik's got to do something with him at some point. Yeah, so it's not looking good there. EBO though played really well. Maybe the best hitting team in the league this week. Didn't hit for a lot of power, but a lot of doubles, driving in a lot of runs. A good week from Lourdes Gurriel driving in 7. Cabrian Hayes drove in 7. Andrew Vaughn drove in 4. I think Cabrian Hayes is their matchup MVP though. He only scored 2 runs, but he 2 homers, 7 RBI, and a 563 on base. With a shout out to Vaughn too, who had a good week.
It's funny because Zane's been complaining about Cabrian Hayes a bunch recently in Slack, and then Cabrian Hayes just comes out and has a really good week. So good for Hayes there. But I find it really funny how that's played out.
Yeah, no, for sure. And they also only had 3 quality starts, but they got a good that Michael Lorenzen start where he was perfect into the 6th. They had him for that. But back to Erik. It's been a couple weeks since we've talked on air about Erik's team. How are you feeling about them at 4 and 5?
I don't really know what to think. I mean, look, on one hand, the last time we did the roto, I believed that Erik was, and let's see if I can find this. So, I mean, with the caveat that we didn't do a roto the week before because I was on vacation and nobody stepped up to do it. Erik was 3rd in the roto with 87 points. I mean, granted, there's a big gap between Erik and then you and me at 1 and 2, and he is kind of in a tight bunch with teams from 3 through 7. But I think that indicates that like he is within a range of teams whose records are about the same to a decent amount better than his record is currently. So I don't know if he's necessarily like, I guess this is within the range of outcomes, but it is still jarring to see him lose 3 straight games like this. I'm not even sure what I just said made any sense, but it's so confusing that I'm just trying to wrap this around my head while talking it out. But I think what's alarming to me too is in addition to him losing 3 straight, the schedule's not getting easier. He plays me this week, and then he plays you the week after. I just alluded to the fact that you and I are just lapping everybody in the roto right now. I don't think it's a stretch to say you and I are probably the best 2 teams in the league. And there's a really real outcome that Erik is 4 and 7 through his first 11 games of the season, more than halfway through the season. And if I'm Erik, you know, maybe I have to start looking at the team and thinking, okay, like, what's wrong? What do I need to do? How do I fix this? Because I mean, if he doesn't take 1 out of 2 against you and me, I think he's in real danger. I think there's probably some positive regression that's coming just because I think that, you know, there are teams who are performing similar to him in the roto with records that aren't all too different. Doesn't mean that I don't think he's probably playing better than his record suggests, but at the same time, at some point, he's got to turn it around with the actual results. So I'm getting increasingly nervous for him, and I think we'll know a lot more about this team after he plays you and me, and how that affects his direction for the rest of the season.
I agree. I think it's going to be tough for him to get even a top 4 playoff spot at this point, let alone a bye. I mean, last year, the 2 teams that had a bye had 4 losses and 5 losses. In 2021, the 2 bye teams had 3 and 4 losses. Erik already has 5 losses. So I think it's pretty much all but lost. race for the bye, unless something crazy happens, is going to be between you, me, and Jake. So
Yeah.
it's really, will will he get a top 4 seed? Uh, I don't know. Will he make the playoffs? I'm not going to go that far and say no yet. I think he's still going to make the playoffs, but like he's got a loss to EBO now, and he's got a loss to Ruthvik, and he's got a loss to Yuki. That's not what you want. And like, does he play EBO again? No, that means EBO has the tiebreaker over him the rest of the season, and they're 1 game back.
Well, not only that too, but he already has 2 losses against Jake, so Jake already owns the tiebreaker over him. He does have a win over me, and we do play this coming week, so we'll figure out after this week what that tiebreaker situation looks like. But it's not looking pretty on the tiebreaker front against a lot of teams that he might be competing with for a playoff spot. I think the only tiebreakers he has that are probably really worth anything currently are the ones over me and one over Andrew. And we'll see if the one over me lasts after this week. So that's tough.
It is tough. It's tough out there. Any other words about Erik, or do we want to move on to the next matchup?
Well, I guess one last question. We could just make this a yes or no, so we're not belaboring the point. But do you still view Erik as a top 4 team if you were doing power rankings today?
Yeah, but he's 4th.
Okay, that's also what I was gonna say. I'm not ready to drop him too low, but he is very clearly number 4. What I will say is if he can hold his own against you and me these next 2 weeks, his schedule after that really opens up, and he doesn't play another team, or he doesn't play another one of last year's semis teams until the last week of the regular season when he plays you. So if he can split against you and me, and granted, I know that a lot of the teams you would have to play in between playing you for the first time and playing you for the second time are teams that he has already lost to. But the schedule does lighten up, and maybe he can capture some wins. I don't know.
Yeah, let's hope so. But yeah, one of the teams Erik plays in the next couple weeks is me, and I played Conor, who's a team that Erik will have to pass to get into the top 4. This was a tough one.
I hope this wasn't your matchup of the week pick. For full disclosure, I have yet to listen to all of this past week's podcast, so I'm not sure. But if it did, my God, this was a stinker of a matchup to pick.
It was, and this matchup really did not live up to expectations. I have not hit this bad. I looked this up. Last time I had an on-base percentage below 300 was week 4 last year against you, where I had an on-base below 300. Rough hitting and then great pitching, but you had even better pitching. So it was a tough matchup. This week, I drove in 35 runs. I stole 7 bases, which is all right, but not great hitting wise. And again, looking at the rest of the league, I wasn't that far below the pace, below the average, but still not ideal. I pitched pretty well. My ERA and whip numbers were solid. 5 quality starts and 5 holds after having, after struggling to get a hold in previous weeks. And considering I started, or in the middle of the week, I had back-to-back days with only 2 hits. Getting my on-base percentage up to where it was a minor feat. I just, had a couple rough days that dug me a hole, but in the end, I still won somehow. 7-5, despite a lot going against me. Connor's offense was kind of in the same boat. He hit 1 home run, which is the new anti-record, so congratulations on that. The old anti-home run record was 2 set by Conor in the year he went to the finals, so maybe there's something there for him. But just a rough week, and one I came out on top.
Yeah, I mean, it, of course, the 1 week you play a team that hits one home run, like, or the 1 week your offense shits the bed is the week you play the team that hits one home run. I don't know how Conor only hit one home run all week. It looked like he was going to hit zero. He got one on Saturday, so it just the whole thing is baffling. But the fact that you two almost tied too. I mean, it came down to some last second whip, and you almost fumbling it by keeping Clay Holmes in your lineup uh, for the 7 o'clock game when you had whip one. It was kind of
Yeah, I removed Gratterall because and I thought I was being so great getting ahead of it, removing Gratterall, but I completely did not see Clay Holmes on my screen when I went to bench Gratterall. So that was awful.
yeah.
And Holmes came into the game and everything.
You had chatted me about making that decision at like 6:50 with the game starting at 7. And I realized that Holmes was still on your team and I didn't, or still in your lineup, but I didn't say anything because I didn't know if you were trying to be strategic and you thought, I don't know, Holmes would pitch well or what. And then at 7:02 after the lineup locked, I was like, all right, now I can say something. And your initial reaction was not one of excitement. Holmes did give up a walk to the first batter, and I thought, this might be it. But ultimately, Holmes retired his next 3 batters he faced. But yeah, why don't you talk through the rest of this? This was just not a good matchup or not a great performance by either of you. But I'm sure there are still some players who you would like to highlight.
There were. I'll say this really feels like my week 1 matchup against Andrew, where really just was not a fun one, but I ended up pulling it off at the very end. Despite some weird pitching stuff going on, it really felt like it was all collapsing. But in the end of the day, I pulled it off. I got some good performances. Well, in my bullpen, I got 3 holds from Hector Neris. Scott McGuff. I don't know how he pronounces it, but Scott McGo, pitched 3 shutout innings in my bullpen, got a hold, 5 Ks, came in a very tenuous spot at about 6 o'clock this afternoon and pitched a very clean inning that I was on my toes for. I'm not going to give matchup MVP to him though. Sonny Gray had 2 quality starts. Good job him. Clayton Kershaw made a good start. Matchup MVP though, I'm looking through my team with a shout out to Masataka Yoshida, who I saw homer in person, which was very cool. I'm going to give it to Aaron Judge. Of course I am. Him and Yoshida were the only bright spots in my lineup all week. Vlad was good too. The 3 of them, Judge had a 455 on base, 4 homers, 6 runs, 5 RBI, hit a double too. Yeah, overall, that was about it for bright spots. But guys like Lindor went 2 for 22, and India had a rough week. Yandy had a rough week. Chris Bryant got hurt. Juan Soto was okay. Rough week for Rizzo too. And then for Connor's team, rough week for Eloy, rough week for Robert, rough week for Sal Perez. Patrick Wisdom 1 for 17. LeMahieu wasn't good. Gallo was bad. So just a lot of bad. We've talked about this matchup too much. A lot of bad, but I pulled it off.
All right, so let's talk about our next matchup here. The next closest matchup was Anthony versus Alex. Anthony beat Alex 7-4-1. They are now both 3-6. Again, not necessarily a matchup to write home about, but both of these teams definitely put up some solid numbers in different categories. Alex had 12 steals on the week. He's absolutely killing it in steals even after trading Jorge Mateo. So good for him there. Interestingly, after dominating a lot of the pitching categories in recent weeks, Alex took a step back there. 5.60 ERA and 132 WHIP meant that he lost both of those categories, even though Anthony didn't put up great numbers in either category for 4.37 ERA and a 121 WHIP. Anthony narrowly won both of the bullpen categories and strikeouts. So Alex's 4 quality starts were enough to win there, but that was the only pitching category he won. The hitting categories were similarly close, other than Anthony running away with OBP. But Anthony did just enough there, tying doubles and winning runs in OBP to win the matchup. So, yeah. Any specific players you want to highlight, Cam?
Yeah, so not the most exciting matchup, like you said. I think Anthony had a solid week from JD Davis, solid week from Jack Sawinski. Joey Weimer was pretty good. I think matchup MVP though. I'll give it to Weimer, with an honorable mention to Spencer Steer, who had a 435 OBP, 3 runs, 5 RBI. Weimer, I had a 478 OBP, 5 runs, 2 doubles, a couple of steals as well that got Anthony 9. I was saying, yeah, you see a team each of the last few weeks, you see a team get 8 or 9 stolen bases and lose stolen bases. That happened to Anthony this week. That would have never happened last year. But yeah, good job to Joey Weimer, helping beat Respect Your Elders. Pitching wise, Anthony had just kind of a mediocre week. He had a good start from Braxton Garrett, although he didn't finish out the quality start. Other than that, though, Christian Javier was good, but not a whole lot else to write home about. As for Alex, it's got to be disappointing. That was a good chance to move to 4-5, move into a tie with Erik, and kind of be on the fringe of the playoffs, but he couldn't get it done this week. Hitting wise, it was pretty rough. Zach McKinstry wasn't that great, and Julio wasn't great. And if Julio's not hitting, then really no one on this team is hitting, except for Rymack, who was good. But yeah, overall, not great hitting, not great pitching. But Anthony's back, moving back towards respectability, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you and I had higher hopes for Anthony's team going into the season. It hasn't been the best start for him, but good to see him kind of bounce back a little bit. I mean, as for Alex and Zach, I think they would both admit that this is a rebuilding year for them. Still very impressed with a lot of the individual pieces that Alex has and how they've done. But yeah, it's still looking like they're trying to rebuild a bit. So I don't really have much more to add here. Do we want to move on to our next matchup?
Yeah, sure. Which one did you think was next? There are 2 left. Both were pretty much blowouts.
Yeah, well, you did mention one thing that I thought would make for a good transition, and you talked about gaudy steals numbers this year, and despite some teams putting up really good steals numbers, they are losing with the new steals rules. Yuki stole 10 bases this week and lost steals to me, 11-10, in a week where I tied my all-time steals record that I set way back when, early in the 2018 season. I believe it was week 6 against Max and Teo. So Max and Teo have not been in the league for a long time. So that should tell you how long it's been since I set that saves record or the steals record. Sorry, but yeah, I beat Yuki 10-2. Yuki actually didn't play bad this week. 375 OBP, 41 ribbies, 10 steals. He had 82 strikeouts, 367 ERA, 117 WHIP are both very solid. But I I just wiped the floor with him. I had a really good week, 46 runs, 15 homers, 46 ribbies, 11 steals, 89 strikeouts, 7 quality starts, 6 saves, 4 holds, a 2.20 ERA, 109 WHIP. I mean, just great numbers across the board, and there's just nothing that Yuki was able to do. My team just simply had it this week and just absolutely ripped them apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm realizing right now I didn't mention this. Anthony has the dynasty belt for the first time ever.
Oh, he does.
And
Oh,
he got the dynasty belt by beating Alex. Because Alex, yeah, this is the belt has moved each of the last 3 weeks now. We haven't been following the belt very much, but
no.
yes, the Anthony at 3-6 now owns the belt. The belt began this season with Jake. It doesn't necessarily have to end the season with a champion, but more likely than not, it will, unless it ends the regular season with someone who doesn't make the playoffs. So it started the season with Jake. You took it from Jake week 1. You lost to Erik. Erik lost it to Ruthvik. Then Ruthvik, week 8, lost to Alex, and now Alex gave it to Anthony. So congrats, Anthony. The final holdout that did not have the dynasty belt.
Wow. I feel like that was one of our trivia questions, maybe. Last holdout for the dynasty belt, but that would be a good one for dynasty trivia this off season. Which team finally got the dynasty belt for the first time during the 2023 season? That's insane. But good for Anthony.
And the loser's belt, EBO gave it to Erik this week.
Oh God, poor Erik. As if he hasn't suffered enough of these losses the past couple of weeks. But in happier news, we can get back to me winning.
Yeah,
So
I haven't even shared my thoughts about this one,
yeah,
about your matchup with Yuki yet. Pretty straightforward, not a whole lot to talk about. Speaking of losses for Erik, he picked Yuki to win this. But you were really the only team that was all around good in most categories this week, and your power numbers weren't great or anything, but you hit better than most teams, or than every team, and you certainly pitched better than everyone. Yuki had a great on base and hit one more double, but this otherwise I was very close to a 12-0. You had a solid week. Let's see here from Adley. Good week from Fernando Tatis Jr. Good week from Castellanos. He hasn't had a lot of good weeks necessarily.
oh, he's been better on the season than you're giving him credit for.
Yeah, wow, he has. Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, good week from Betts. But looking pitching wise, good week from Gallon. But your matchup MVP has to be Marcus Stroman, who pitched 15 shutout innings, got 2 quality starts, 14 Ks, allowed just 5 hits and 4 walks, good for an 0.60. Whip, he got 2 of your 7 quality starts there, and he was tremendous.
Yeah, I started with that perfect game in his first start against Tampa too. So not an easy opponent, and played San Diego in the second game. So but he's been one of the stabilizers in my rotation with all of the injuries that I've had. You could reasonably argue, especially with Cole and Gallon not being quite on top of their games. Their last couple of starts, that he's been my most consistent starting pitcher this year, which is not something I expected to say at all. I thought he was maybe my 8th best starting pitcher, but and also not anyone who has been winning matchup MVPs, but just wanted to give a collective shout out to my bullpen, who, like Stroman, has been keeping me in the entering today. Felix Bautista, Yennier Cano, and Alexis Diaz were 1, 2, and 3, or Cano 1, Bautista 2, and Diaz 3 in the player rater. among relievers. Those three have been great. Will Smith has been a great pickup. Giovanni Gallegos has been looks like he may have overtaken Ryan Helsley for the closer's job in St. Louis, and Brian Abreu's been pitching great on the year. Not to mention a bunch of other guys have streamed. So it's been rough missing a good chunk of my rotation, but my ERA and WHIP have been even better than last year, and I've been doing really well in the bullpen categories, and those guys are a huge reason why I've been able to perform as well as I have. So not the way I expected to be winning this season, especially after I went out and spent a lot to go and bring in some more starting pitching, but it's worked out so far.
Yeah, no, your bullpen's been killing it. Absolutely.
No, it's been a fun one. Even more fun when it's the 8th and 9th inning of the Orioles games that are doing it for me too. So it makes watching the O's win even more fun. But enough about my team. I think we summed it up really well here. Do we want to talk about the last matchup?
Yeah, let's do it. Another blowout loss for the Drury. They're 1-8. They, low-key were one of the better hitting teams this week. Andrew was probably the best hitting team this week. Unfortunately, weird to say that they got unlucky, but they a little bit did hitting wise. Pitching wise, however, they, had 27 strikeouts all week, 2 quality starts. They only used 6 starts. This team could use a starting pitcher. They only used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 starting pitchers in total, which or eight pitchers in total, which
there are 9
considering you get 9 pitching
yeah.
slots, that's kind of weird. I don't even know how that's possible.
This is the worst pitching staff in the league, and it's not particularly close. And while I do think they have some interesting bats, if they can't get any semblance of pitching going, they're screwed. And it's only worse now with Dustin May on the IL. That's probably one of the reasons why they only use 8 starting pitchers this week.
No, 8 pitchers,
or
including relievers.
Eight pitchers. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. 8 pitchers. That's probably one of the reasons why they only use 8 pitchers this week. I guess they technically had like 9 in their lineup good chunks of the days this week. I just think that like one of them must not have pitched at all this week. Right? You know what? Ryan Helsley's been in their lineup all week, but Ryan Helsley did not pitch this week. Ryan Helsley has not pitched since Sunday of last week.
Yeah, that's rough. This team, I mean, they'd be in a slightly better spot if they tried to stream holds a little bit, or if they streamed a couple starting pitchers from time to time.
They're a good holds team. That's the funny part too, is like they're among the league leaders in holds. That's their one good category.
Yeah.
This is the worst pitching staff in the league. I mean, I don't. They actually traded for bats in the offseason. They're kind of interesting in that regard, but I mean, they did trade away a lot of pitching in order to acquire them. So I don't know. I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah, but let's talk about the team that won here. Andrew has 4 Texas Rangers in his lineup. So naturally he has the most runs and the most RBIs of any team this week. Jonah Heim had 12 RBI. He's the matchup MVP. With a shout out to Josh Young, who was also really solid. Nate Lowe had a good week too. Just listing Rangers at this point. The pitching wasn't really there for him. He did get 3 saves from Jordan Romano this week, and 2 more from David Robertson. But it's the Rangers bats, and that was all he needed.
Oh yeah, I mean that's all he needs. It reminds me last year after I got Mookie Betts and Trey Turner, and it was pretty much like I had Betts, Turner, Freeman batting like 1, 2, 3 in the Dodgers lineup with Max Muncy batting cleanup or fifth, and just like when that game turned on, like my fantasy score could like change with like a snap of a finger. This is kind of what Andrew's situation is reminding me of.
Yeah, no, a little bit. Yeah, your team was definitely scary down the stretch last year with a lot of, especially with the Dodgers seemingly almost always playing that Sunday night game. It would change
Yes,
in the blink of an eye at the very end.
yes, it was magical. It gave me a lot of hope. The hope was good, kept me going. Um, but speaking of hope, and honestly, we've had good transitions to the rest of these, and I didn't have a good transition for that, but we're gonna go with this anyway. Let's talk about next week's matchups. What is our matchup to watch for next week?
Yeah, so there's a couple good ones, but I think I want to give it to um, the matchup between Yuki and Ruthvik is the interesting one. We've got Ruthvik on. He'll be on in just a minute to discuss what he thinks about this matchup. But Yuki's going to be 4-4-1. Ruthvik is going to be a game back at 3-5-1. Both of these teams are kind of in that 6-7 range. And we don't know who's going to come out of that with Andrew being half a game, or with Andrew being tied with Yuki being a game ahead of Ruthvik. There's this whole mix there, and this is going to iron that out a little bit, and we'll have a little bit of clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely an interesting matchup. There's a big hump in the middle, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes itself out. Kind of at the top of the standings here, or top slash clump. Uh, I wanted to give a shout out to me playing Erik. We've kind of belabored the point about Erik, so I'm not gonna just keep talking about it. And that's, I think, part of the reason why this isn't our matchup to watch this week. But Erik really needs to get his shit together and fast. So that will also be an interesting one to track this week. And anything else you'd like to say here, or should we go over last week's pick'em?
No, just the last thing is that big clump in the middle is gonna get even weirder with Erik playing at that record despite being a little better in general. So it's only getting more crowded.
Yeah, more crowded, but there is another playoff spot that opens up if you're not considering Erik to be one of those locks in that top tier.
That is also true. It all comes around in some way.
It all comes around indeed. But all right, as for last week's pick'em, let's start with our guest picker first. Erik went 3-2-1. He correctly predicted Cam and Andrew and Jake to win. Incorrectly picked Alex and Zach to win. Incorrectly picked himself to win. And incorrectly picked me to tie Yuki. So don't make that mistake again, Erik. But let's talk about me and you now. We both picked you and Andrew and me and Jake to win. We won 4-0 there. I picked Alex and Zach to win. That was wrong. You picked Anthony to win. You were right there. And we both picked Erik to win, which we were wrong about. So I won 4-2. You won 5-1. Erik won 3-2-1. I am 31-19-4. You are 33-14-7. When you convert the ties, I am 33-21. You are 36-17-1. You get the pick first this week. Go ahead.
All right. Let's see here. I think where to begin? I think I will beat Andrew. But he's gonna give me a tough time. He always seems to. I think that Jake's going to beat EBO. I think that Connor is going to beat the the elders. And then from there, I think Anthony is going to beat the jury. I think you will be just fine against Erik. And let's pick a tie. It's been a while since a tie. It's been a while since I picked a tie. I think matchup to watch is a tie.
All right. I will pick Jake to beat EBO. I mean, shout out to EBO for beating Erik last week. They're in the middle of a tough stretch. But I don't think they're gonna pull it out this week. I think Anthony will beat Daniel and Matt. I think Connor will bounce back and beat Alex and Zach. I think it gets a little tougher from there. Last time I played Erik, you and I both picked Erik, and Erik did win. I have a hard time doing that again here. I'm going to pick myself to win. I just think my team is playing really well right now. Erik's team is struggling a bit. I know Erik can't be held down for too long, but I'm feeling really good about my team right now, and I can't ignore that. I think you're going to beat Andrew. This is one where I really want to pick Andrew to win, and I know his bats are on fire, but your team has been playing too well this season. And just because he had one down week against Connor, I don't think that that's necessarily going to hold. So I'm going to pick you to win. And I'm going to pick Yuki to beat Ruthvik, simply because Ruthvik, for whatever reason, does not seem like he can close recently, and I think that Yuki's team has been playing a bit better than Ruthvik's team as a whole. I have a little more faith in it. Whether that's misguided faith, I'm not sure, but I have a little more faith right now in Yuki than I do in Ruthvik. So I also didn't want to just pick the same things that you did. So there we go. We had the same picks with the exception of me picking Yuki to beat Ruthvik and you're picking them to tie.
All right, there we go. So this is normally where we try and struggle with how to wrap up an episode, but we don't have to worry about that this week because we have an interview coming up with Ruthvik. It's going to be great. A lot of great questions asked and answered in that interview. If you can't tell, we haven't recorded it yet, but yeah, I'm sure it'll be great. And if it ends up being terrible or not happening, then we'll edit this part out.
All right, we are back here with Ruthvik, or should I say I am back. Cam is not with us for this interview. Cam is busy watching Ellie De La Cruz make his major league debut. Congratulations to Ellie for finally making it up, and he's had a good debut so far. So it's just me and Ruthvik here. Maybe not the best thing for Ruthvik considering some of the things I've said about one of his trades, but in any event, how's it going, Ruthvik? It's been a while since we've interviewed you. Cam keeps track of this on a spreadsheet. I have to see the last episode that we've had you on. But while I look that up, how have you been?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I always love coming on talking on the podcast with you guys. I love listening to your feedback every week and the trash talk. But I'm feeling good. I mean, everything else except for my team's doing good. So
yeah. No, it's been let's dive right into your team here. It's been a couple of rough losses to Jake. And I know as a whole, you've been playing a lot of close games lately, highlighted by a win over Erik. what your team on the season now is 3-5-1. I guess how are you feeling about the team overall?
Yeah, I mean, you put it well. We're playing close games, but just not able to like go over the line on the weekends. And honestly, it's just the weekends have been terrible for my team hitting wise. I don't know if there's something that they're just taking the weekends off or what, but if the team could just hit how they do Monday through Friday, could have had a couple more wins. But honestly, I'm still encouraged. I'm not too discouraged about the team's chances this year. Just kind of looking at the standings, like seeing Erik in seventh is also surprising, but we're like about a third of the way in through the season. I think a lot of my players are due for that positive regression.
No, absolutely. And I think there's a pretty tight band of teams here, between
Yeah,
the fourth seed and the 11th seed. All those teams are within 2.5 games of each other. So,
yeah,
I mean,
absurd.
you're a game back of a playoff spot. So, I mean, it's really tight. I think, you're definitely really in it. And I think this is a good transition to a couple of the trades that you have made that I feel like have really helped your chances, or at least a good attempt by you to start to separate from some of the other teams that are kind of in that mix for one of those playoff spots. So let's start with there are two big trades that you made. I want to start with the first one here. Erik and Cam talked about this on the podcast last week when I wasn't on, but you and I have not talked about this on the podcast. So this is definitely going to be interesting. You traded Alex Bregman, Alex Ramirez, and Peter Strzelecki to Yuki for Nico Horner, Robert Hassel III, and Yuki's 2024 third round pick. So what was your thinking behind making that trade?
Yeah, I mean that trade took weeks to complete, but I mean I'll be honest, I there were a lot of things about Bregman I was just not that like happy with. I think what we saw in 2019 is not really what we're going to get out of Bregman. I think 25 home run season would be kind of like a ceiling in my opinion at this point. And I will admit, since I traded him, he's been hitting really well. But when I did, I think his OBP was like in the low to mid 330s, batting average under 250. And I was thinking, okay, at that point, his value could get better or it could just fully tank. And I wanted to take the gamble on the guy who's 3 years younger, who potentially will steal 30 plus bases, probably won't get 25 home runs, but I think he had like 14 or so last year. So I was kind of hoping if he can improve upon that even a little bit, then that'll be good. But overall, I was just comparing the stats, and I thought that what I was going to lose in home runs and possibly RBIs, I was going to gain in runs, stolen bases, and who knows, maybe even the OBP would have canceled out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Bregman definitely in the past couple of years has not been as good of a player as he was in 2019. As you mentioned, the plate discipline is definitely there, but there's a lot of reason to suggest that he might be on the decline a bit. And I mean, I've always been a Nico Horner fan. He just turned 26. You're right. The steals numbers look great. I mean, he had a 10-20 season last year, and he's on pace already to top that, especially in the steals department. So, walk rates up to strikeout rates down. His OBP is up. So, definitely a good player that you acquired. I also thought it was interesting in this deal, just beyond the major league pieces. You traded away Alex Ramirez, so that's a pretty highly regarded Mets prospect, if I'm correct on
Yeah.
the team. How did you feel about trading him away? What was the thought process there?
That was tough. I'll admit, kind of the negotiations that took place started off with me asking for more on top of Horner for Bregman, and then we really couldn't find that second piece that both that Yuki wanted to trade and that I really wanted. So I kind of decided, let me add something that he would like. And I got to the point where I realized, okay, Ramirez is someone I'm probably going to regret in about 3 or so years, but he's pretty far away from coming to the majors. And he also really didn't look that good so far this year. And 19-year-old outfielders, they could go one way or another. And I know the guy I also acquired, Robert Hassel, was in a similar position last year. So I kind of thought, okay, yeah, Mets prospect, great, but I I really wanted to take the opportunity to maybe gamble on Robert Hassel, who honestly was regarded much higher. And I think he's been picking it up this year as well. So in a way, it felt like a downgrade just because I was giving up a Mets prospect. But I do think that Robert Hassel is a higher ceiling. And if he can kind of go back to the prospect he was with, I think the Padres, right? It could end up being a good secondary piece.
No, absolutely. I was honestly surprised to see that Hassel's prospect pedigree has fallen as much as it has, but I think he's a decent buy low
Yeah.
as a prospect. Prospect development's not linear. He's still only 21. He's 21 in Double A right now, which I believe is
That's pretty young, yeah.
yeah, it's pretty young for the league. So I think I like the gamble. I think you're right about Ramirez. He could be good, but he's still far away. A lot could still happen. No, absolutely. I think Strzelecki seems like a holds guy that Yuki really wanted, but anything else you wanted to say about him? I didn't think he
Uh,
was.
I think I got what I could out of him. I think he gave me a lot of holds in a couple of weeks, and holds guys you can recycle back and forth. I think as we were just talking about, like I just dropped Chris Martin after he was pretty serviceable for me for about 3 weeks. You can always pick up one and drop another. And also, there's another guy. I don't remember his name, but the Brewers seem to like a lot. His name's like something with a P. It's like Payamps or something like that. That guy looks really,
Yeah, he's been
yeah.
really good. He's actually just finished pitching right now for the Brewers. He actually gave up the go ahead run, but he's been very good overall.
Yeah, he's got really good, like filthy stuff. So I feel like he's someone that potentially will take over that holds position. So the setup man job. So I mean, I'm not super upset about giving up Strzelecki.
no, I don't think you should be. But yeah, anything else you want to say about that trade? If not, there's another trade I like a lot better for you that we also should definitely need to dive into here.
Yeah, I mean, no, it was tough for me to trade Bregman. He was one of the original guys on this team that's left. Obviously, really, really good player, and I know Yuki's uh corner infield is now just elite. But as long as Nico Horner stays healthy, then it could potentially end up being a nice win-win for both of us.
No, absolutely. I'm still of the opinion that Bregman is a better player, and I'm still of the opinion that and a caveat here, I'm kind of going in here because I wasn't on last week's podcast explaining my thoughts a little more, but I still think Bregman's a little bit of a better player and someone I would probably gamble on over Nico Horner, but I also get why you made the trade and why Horner is a good fit for the way that your team is
Yeah.
constructed. And I do like buying low on Robert Hassel, who I think is definitely a very solid prospect. But I think you hit the nail on the head there. Let's transition over to the other deal. You traded Luis Garcia, the starting pitcher, James Outman,
Right.
and Max Kepler to Daniel and Matt for George Springer and Hunter Renfroe. So why don't you explain your logic for making this trade?
That was a fun one. Yeah, I think that one. I remember when I first acquired Luis Garcia in another trade we'll talk about later. I really, really liked him. Really young guy with a couple of years under his belt where he just had phenomenal peripherals, and Astros also, they just churn out these really good starting pitchers. I was super excited for him, and then the whole pitch clock stuff was finalized, and I started realizing, okay, for the guy with one of the slowest windups in the league, this is probably going to be an issue. Um, I think everyone in the league knows that I've been trying to offload him since then, and he started off the year super cold, but unfortunately, like right when he got hurt, I thought he had a couple of really, really good starts. So I was really like, okay, maybe I can keep him. It'll be great. But that injury, it really stops a team that's competing, right? And especially with Tommy John, I really hate banking on guys with going under Tommy John just because you're going to lose this year. You're probably going to lose a chunk of next year just because of recovery and then the whole innings limit. So for me, I kind of thought, okay, I don't want to go into a full reset, but also he seems like a great candidate for a team that is kind of retooling, rebuilding a little bit. And I kind of reached out to those teams, and they seem like the perfect fit for me because both guys I got are in their 30s. I think Springer's like 33, Renfro's like 31. Both don't really fit their window. And I kind of just, Sean and I said, hey, like, this seems like a pretty good fit. What do I have to do to make it happen? And the second piece was the one that really we were hung up on for a while. And I decided I'm going to sell low on Outman, um, which I know if I would have traded Outman back in middle of April, probably could have gotten a lot more. But by the time I traded him, he was losing playing time. His strikeout rate was one of the worst in the league. And I kind of thought, okay, maybe it's time I just give up on him. So I thought it was a great like win-win. I got two guys who can both hit for power, really need power in my team. Springer's phenomenal. He's got 10 stolen bases already. Renfro's kind of losing playing time a little bit, but I had to take the gamble. And I know you and I we talked about Renfro when we were drafting for the Gallardo Cup. He's got great power. You fully sold me on him. So if he can turn it around, I'll be really happy. And I think they'll be pretty pleased getting a 25-year-old starting pitcher. They can afford to wait for him. And then another 26-year-old bat who really showed that he can hit in the majors, but they just have to be a little patient on him.
Yeah, I think you summed it up very nicely. Cam and I kind of touched on this earlier in the episode, so I'm not gonna just regurgitate all that. But I mean, I agree. I think this is a nice win-win deal. I think this is the type of deal that I think you needed to make to really improve the offense, and I think this is the type of deal that Daniel and Matt needed to make to get younger and move off a couple older bats that just really didn't fit their competitive timeline. So I think you all did a very nice job there. I'd be remiss to not mention Max Kepler, since I feel like he's been one of your boys. So is there any parting words you want to say about Max Kepler as he leaves your team?
I totally forgot I gave up Kepler to that team.
I did too.
Oh,
Honestly,
man.
I feel like he's a forgotten piece of this trade. Like he's just like such a small name compared to the others. I don't blame you.
The thing about Kepler is I traded away Jeffrey Springs and Mark Vientos to
Oh,
get Kepler. Yeah. It was I liked Kepler a lot for a few years, and you know that, but I think I traded him right when he got off the IL, and it kind of made sense to me because I was taking in two outfielders and I just didn't want to hold an extra bench bat. So I asked them if they wanted Kepler, or I said I would throw in something else, and they actually preferred Kepler over Yuki's third this year, which I'd rather have the pick, honestly. But Kepler's good. His StatCast page is fantastic. I love him as a player, but I think it was just time for me to move on.
yeah, I think so too. He's always one of those guys where I feel like the actual numbers just never match like what it looks like he could be, and maybe one of these years it will. But I mean, at
Yeah.
some point, you just have to stop gambling on that. And
Yeah. Yeah. 2019 was kind of that peak. He had that 36 home run season, but I mean, then again, it was 2019.
yeah,
Um,
the rapid ball, yeah.
so
Uh,
exactly. So yeah, I'll miss him, but I think I'll be happy with Springer.
I think you will as well. I think it's a nice upgrade to your outfield. But I mean, speaking of upgrades, I mean, I feel like you've been the star of May when it comes to making upgrades. I mean, those two trades. I mean, you got Emmanuel Valdez and Jose Miranda. Um, you know, do you have any other trades coming down the pipeline, or are you still looking to be active in the trade market, or do you think you've made your big moves from now and you're kind of more in a wait and see mode?
I'm definitely looking to make more trades. I think everyone knows I'm more than happy to trade for my prospects, more than happy to trade for my arms, but I always can improve this offense. I think everyone knows how frustrated I get on the weekends when my offense bats a collective 3 for 44 every Sunday. So, I've kind of mentioned Brooks Lee in trades. He's been a tough one to keep away from the trade market, but if I get the right trade offer, he is absolutely not off limits. And I can't wait to see if anyone would actually end up taking him off my arms off my hands, because I'm super excited to see what he can do in the middle infield. But hopefully when he comes up later this year or early next year. But if I can get an offer that, gives me a win now upgrade in the present, especially on offense, that is a guy that I know I've talked to a lot of teams about.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned Brooks Lee because it's a great transition to the last topic I wanted to discuss in this interview, and that's the Jacob deGrom deal. You got Brooks Lee in that trade.
Yeah.
So the deGrom deal was obviously a while ago, right? That happened in January, but we got the news today, a few hours before recording, that Jacob deGrom needs Tommy John. And I remember at the time saying, being kind of confused with the return, but being like, hey, maybe deGrom's going to blow out his arm early on, and Ruthvik's going to look like a genius. And it turns out I just need to stop doubting you. And I that's one of those scenarios where I need to eat crow. But is there anything you would like to say about deGrom, that trade, your thoughts about that? Just what do you have to say?
Look, I hate it for deGrom. Man could still be like first ballot Hall of Famer. Just I loved him as a pitcher, obviously, on the Mets. I kind of him leaving the Mets on that note was rough, but I would love to see him just continue that success and eventually end up hopefully winning a ring somewhere else. Even though couldn't do it on the Mets, but I love him as a guy, as a player, but this really sucks for him. I feel terrible. He's such a good pitcher to watch. Like, he just commands the baseball so well. And I hope he comes back next year strong. But focusing on the trade, yeah, I guess at that time I was just so upset that he left the team that I really shopped him for quite a while. And that trade was interesting. I'm looking at it right now, and there were so many moving pieces there. And honestly, there were a couple of mistakes I even made within that trade. Like, I remember I could have just straight up gotten Pablo Lopez. Like, it could have been a straight up Pablo Lopez, Starling Marte, and Brooks Lee for Jacob deGrom and probably Mitch Haniger, which that could have been a fantastic return. But I ended up then talking to Andrew, and I said, look, I didn't like Pablo Lopez, and I thought him getting traded to the Twins was going to make his value even worse, which I was extremely wrong about that. The Twins have one of the best rotations in the league. And he ended up taking Pablo, but he also took Ian Happ and DL Hall for me for, Luis Garcia and Cronenworth. And Cronenworth's been terrible. We just talked about Garcia, but I think that trade could have been a lot better. But just looking at the deGrom side of things, I think I probably would have even done just straight up for Brooks Lee. But getting Starling Marte has been really nice. He's been a very, very good outfield four for me.
Yeah, Marte's really picked it up after his slow start. Yeah, I think it's definitely one of those trades that's interesting to look at in retrospect. And you're right, it's not just about deGrom, it's about the other pieces that moved in that deal. I guess one thing I would say to your point about it'd be nice to have Pablo Lopez instead of Luis Garcia. I mean, really now the way you could think about it is like, would you rather have the George Springer, Hunter Renfroe combo or have Pablo Lopez? I guess you might still have James Outman in that scenario, but I'm sure that kind of eases some of the pain of that. a little
I think
bit.
the big thing is I would also have Ian Happ and DL Hall. I think Ian Happ's been pretty good if I remember right.
He has been, yeah. That Cubs lineup started off really hot. I don't know how they've been doing recently, but Ian Happ was a big part of them starting off really hot, and I know he's been batting at the top of that lineup. So, or I think he's batting third if I remember correctly. But yeah, that's going to be. I'm sure the next time we have you on, we'll do another retrospective of that deal as well. I think, obviously it's, June 6th. We're through a decent chunk of the season, around 60 games for most teams, but there's still 100 some games left, and it's going to be really interesting to see how
Right.
the trade ages. So hopefully we'll have you on in the off season, and we'll be able to look back at that trade. But anything
Yeah.
else you like to say about that trade, or anything else in general?
I think I got my thoughts out of here. Yeah, you're right. It'll be really, really exciting to look back at a lot of these trades. I mean, we make so many in the league. And we'll probably have one by the end of the week by someone. So it's really it's nice to look back and just think about like a lot of these trades. I know you and I do that like off the recording too quite a bit. And that's kind of the nice part about having such a nice active league is you get so many of these trades to talk about.
Oh yeah, I mean, what we're now at 555 trades, thanks to the three that you have made over the past couple of weeks. That's insane. I feel like Cam and I, it just feels like just yesterday we recorded that 500th trade podcast. So my God, it's crazy. And shout out to one thing I'd like to add. Those trades pushed you ahead of Cam in the all-time trades list. So
Oh,
um,
really?
yeah, Cam's made 87. You've now made 88, which ties you with Connor. So if you make a trade before Connor does, you'll move ahead of Connor as well. That puts you you are now tied for fourth all time. Only three teams ahead of you, predictably, is me, and then also EBO, and then Erik. So
Wow. That's
yeah,
really exciting.
you got a little ways to work your way up to third. Erik's at third with 126, but uh, you're making a lot of trades lately, so maybe you can start to challenge that a little bit. I think you've made four trades now in the season, and during the season there has only been 10 trades, so you are 40% of the trades during this season.
Yeah, you're right. That is kind of crazy. And in the last month, it was just me.
Yeah, from the last three trades. I mean, there was the Brandon Marsh de Sclafani deal and the Charlie Morton deal at the beginning of the month, but you dominated the like last 3 or 4 weeks with trades. Uh, so
Speaking of Cam, I wonder how he's doing right now. The Reds just tied it up in the bottom of the ninth through a hit by pitch to Fraley.
oh
It is
my
now Matt
God.
McLain up with the bases loaded in a tied game and one out.
Oh man. It's a shame because so Ellie De La Cruz is up four or uh
Yeah,
a couple batters later, but there's no way.
yeah, there's no way.
Yeah, there's no way he could walk it off here. I guess if McLain and India get it off, Ellie could walk it off in the bottom of the 10th, but he couldn't walk it off in the bottom of the ninth. But that's
Yep.
insane.
Reds offense is so exciting, man. And they still have Encarnacion Strand down there. I'm glad they called up Ellie De La Cruz today. It's a special day, but
Yeah.
man, this is so much fun.
Well, and then Andrew Abbott started for them yesterday. He looks
Right.
really good. And then they have Noel V. Marte still there in the minors. And my God, I mean,
This is that one outfielder. Just, make a trade for, and I don't even know who are good outfielders on the block right now, but they just need one good outfielder for them.
Yeah, they need that. They can really use some more starting pitching too, because Lodolo on the 60-day IL, and then Hunter Green is a little banged up right now.
That is
But
true. They're going to be a really fun team next year. I think if they make a good couple of moves, they're going to be so much fun. It looks like they tried Spencer Steer in left field today. So if they move him into the outfield, that could definitely be something that is worth like keeping an eye on.
oh yeah, I'm curious to see how that experiment works. Especially because if he could play the outfield, that clears room for Christian Encarnacion Strand to play first base. Full time. So, got that infield. I mean, it's amazing because you had that infield for a while there with like Mike Moustakas and a struggling Eugenio Suarez, Jose Barrero,
Yeah.
some of these other guys. I'm sure Cam, if he was on, could go through all
Yeah.
these names, and now it just looks ridiculously elite. So, good for
Looks
their
like they
bets.
brought in Shelby Miller. They brought in Shelby Miller to face
Matt
Matt McLain. McLain. This is gonna
and
be really
I still can't believe Shelby Miller is a thing again. Good for him for bouncing back and making it back uh, into the majors. But yeah, anything else you would like to say about your team? I know Cam's going to have a lot of fun when he comes back and edits this and hear us saying good things about the Reds. But anything else you would like to say about your team, the league? Any last words before we wrap up here?
No, it's gonna be a fun year. I can't wait to see kind of what happens throughout the year. Thanks for having me on. Always a blast, and good luck to everyone. And I'm always open for more trade ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've been the big trader over the last 3 months. I'm excited to see what more trades you do make. Um, and I searched this up actually. So but before you go here, this is episode 121 that we have you on. Breaking news: Matt McLain walked
Matt
off.
McLain walked it off.
Good stuff.
Oh,
But we've had you on one other time before. Do you want to guess what episode number that was?
is it 121 right now, you said?
Well, yeah, well 121 is right now. This is the one we have you on right now. We've had you on once previously.
Watch it be like episode 21 or something.
Episode 10. So it's really been,
Oh wow.
yeah. But I think we've talked about having you on at various points, and just for whatever reason the schedules haven't lined up. But I'm glad it's finally lined up here. It's been 111 episodes. I'm sure that is the largest gap between episodes
Yeah.
for anyone. Shout out to Cam for keeping track of this. He has a very detailed spreadsheet with who has been on each podcast. But let's hope it's not 111 episodes before we have you on again. I'm sure we'll have you on
Yep.
sometime soon. And yeah, with that, we'll wrap up here. Another great episode. Cam and I will be back next week to talk about week 10 and get into rivalry week. So you and I will finally have our first matchup of the season. I am excited for that.
Oh man, that's next week.
Yeah, I'm nervous. Your team always plays me well, so I'm excited but nervous. But yeah, until then, I'm sure I'll have a lot of fun things to say previewing our matchup next week. So I'm sure you will want to tune in, and I'm sure everybody else will want to tune in as we talk about their matchup with their rivals. But until then, we will see you all next week.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
This podcast is good.